All right, good afternoon. I will start off with a trip announcement, which is in fact two separate trips. The Secretary General will leave for London tomorrow to attend the annual meeting of the UN Chief Executive Board. This is one of the semi-annual meetings that brings together, under the chairmanship of the Secretary General, the executive heads of 31 United Nations agencies, and specialized or UN organizations. This meeting, which will be hosted by the International Maritime Organization, will focus on the socioeconomic implication of the fourth industrial revolution, on the implementation of the SDG agenda, as well as fostering innovation within the United Nations system. The Secretary General will also deliver a strong message to the Board on the need to improve the UN system's approach to preventing and responding to sexual harassment in the workplace. During his visit, the Secretary General will meet with Prime Minister Theresa May, Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, and other UK senior officials. The Secretary General will be back in New York on Friday night. Then 2 weeks from now, on May 14th, the Secretary General will be in Vienna, Austria, for consultations with the Austrian government, including President Alexander von der Bellen, Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, and Karin Kneißl, the Federal Minister for Europe, Integration and Foreign Affairs. Later that afternoon, the Secretary General will visit the Vienna International Center, where he will address the United Nations Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. He will also hold a town hall meeting with United Nations staff working in Vienna. On Thursday, the 15th of May, the Secretary General will deliver a keynote address during the R20 Austrian World Summit, an annual event on sustainable development organized by Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor of California. During his remarks, he will reiterate his call for global action to confront climate change. The Secretary General is also expected to have bilateral meetings with other senior leaders on the sidelines of the summit. From Vienna, he will travel on to Brussels for discussions with European Union institutions. In Brussels, the Secretary General is expected to meet with the EU Council President, Donald Tusk, EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, and the High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the Commission, Federica Mogherini, as well as other EU officials. The Secretary General will also meet with the Prime Minister of Belgium, Charles Michel, on the 16th of May, and he's expected to leave Belgium on that day. The Security Council, as you know, is on a mission traveling to Asia, and they had visited Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh over the weekend. This morning, they met with the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, in Dhaka. Following that meeting, the Security Council delegation flew to Naypyidaw, where it met with Myanmar State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi and General Min Aung Hlaing, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The Council mission also met with civil society, parliamentarians, and government representatives in the capital of Myanmar. Tomorrow, they will fly to Rakhine State, where the delegation is expected to meet with local government and civil society. They will visit northern Rakhine State and then have a press conference upon returning to Naypyidaw. The UN mission in Afghanistan strongly condemned the attacks carried out today in a Kabul neighborhood heavily populated by civilians. Initial reports indicate that at least 14 civilians were killed and 30 were injured in 2 attacks, with the second attack timed 30 minutes later to target journalists arriving on the scene and emergency personnel seeking to provide aid to the first attack. These attacks caused untold human suffering to Afghan families, said the Secretary General's Special Representative, Mr. Taidichi Yamamoto, and he expressed his deep condolences to the families of the victims. The Secretary General also clearly condemns these attacks, and I expect to have a formal statement from him shortly. Nikolai Mladenov, the Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, welcomed the convening of the Palestinian National Council, which today met in Ramallah for the first time in 2 decades. He said this is a critical time for Palestinians, and the leadership has a responsibility to end divisions and deteriorating economic, humanitarian, and social institutions in Gaza. Mr. Mladenov noted that unity is essential to furthering the Palestinian national aspirations for statehood and sovereignty. He added that is why the government of national consensus should be enabled to take up its responsibilities in Gaza and bring immediate relief and change to the population. No one should stand in their way, he said in a statement. And from Syria, our humanitarian colleagues are concerned for the safety and protection of tens of thousands of people as fighting continues to be reported in several areas of northern rural Homs Governorate. Fighting has already resulted in reports of death and injury, as well as attacks on civilian infrastructure. Yesterday, local sources reported that strikes rendered 2 hospitals inoperable in Al-Zafarane and Al-Rastan. Shelling from the area of northern rural Homs on Homs City also has reportedly killed and injured several people. The United Nations calls on all parties and those with influence over them to ensure protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure and to allow for safe, sustained, and unimpeded humanitarian access to all those in need, with their obligations under international humanitarian law. Over the weekend in Somalia, the UN mission there condemned the suicide bombing in the city of GAALKACYO, which reportedly killed government security officers and civilians. The head of the UN mission in Somalia, Michael Keating, said the people and authorities in GAALKACYO are courageously finding a way forward. They should not be derailed by this assault on their chances for a peaceful future. And also in Somalia, our humanitarian colleagues on the ground tell us that 430,000 people have been impacted by flooding, including nearly 175,000 people who have been displaced as heavy rains continue in flood-prone areas across large swaths of southern and central parts of the country. The rains have resulted in the flooding of the Juba and Shabelle rivers. Internally displaced people remain the most vulnerable to the impact of the flooding, with many camps located in low-lying areas. Humanitarian partners on the ground have prioritized water, sanitation, hygiene, shelter, and food response in their interventions. Yesterday, the country's prime minister appealed to the international community for urgent humanitarian assistance to avoid a crisis. Somalia's humanitarian response plan, requiring $1.5 billion, is only 19% funded. And we're happy to report from South Sudan that 10 aid workers who were detained while on an assessment mission near Ye in central Equatoria have now been freed. They had been held by an armed group since the 25th of April. Humanitarian workers, all South Sudanese nationals, including one from the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 2 from UNICEF, 1 from the South Sudanese Development Organization, 2 from the NGO Across, 3 from Plan International, and 1 from Action Africa Help. The humanitarian coordinator for South Sudan, Alain Nudehu, expressed concern at the deteriorating environment for humanitarian workers across the country. Last week, a humanitarian worker was killed while returning to check on a health clinic that had been looted near Lear County. This most recent death brings to 100 the number of aid workers killed since the conflict in South Sudan started in December of 2013. And our friends at the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, have helped remove 27 disused, highly radioactive sources from 5 South American countries, the largest such project it's ever facilitated. The material, mainly used for medical purposes, such as treating cancer, sterilizing instruments, was transported to Germany and the U.S. for recycling. Canada, where some of the sources were manufactured, funded the project upon request by the IAEA with support from Bolivia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay. While nuclear safety and security are national responsibilities, the IAEA helps member states upon request to meet these responsibilities through training, technical advice, peer reviews, and other services. And wanted to flag that today in Bonn, the government's kicked off the next round of UN climate change negotiations to further develop guidelines for implementing the Paris Climate Change Agreement. The guidelines allows the agreement to become operational, and final decisions are then taken to the UN Climate Change Conference COP24, which will be held in Poland in early December. Also today, the UNFCCC released a report which details practical ways of adapting to climate impacts, such as increased flooding or intensifying storms in human settlements from mega cities to villages. The report claims to share good practices and lessons learned to date and will be taken forward during this year's negotiations, and you can find it on the site. Today, our honor roll has moved up to 87. If anyone can guess which two countries have given money, you can have the first question. All right, it's Tuvalu and Spain. There you go. Nizar.
Thank you, Stéphane. I wonder if the United Nations have been involved in any of the agreements reached in Syria regarding Yarmouk, the Hajar al-Aswad, Fua and Kafria.
We have not been part of these agreements. We are aware of reports an agreement was reached to evacuate the fighters from Yarmouk to Idlib in exchange for the evacuation of the entire population of Kfo and Kafria. Today, the first batch of evacuees was meant to depart, but it's unclear as of now from us if the buses have actually moved. The UN calls on all parties to fully respect international humanitarian and human rights law and to guarantee the protection of civilians. Any evacuation of civilians must be safe, voluntary, and in strict accordance with protection standards under international law. Mr. Lee.
Sure. You said that, I guess, at the Chief Executive Board in London, the Secretary General will be speaking about the issue of, I guess, sexual harassment and sexual abuse. So I wanted to ask you a couple of things. One is, I'm sure you've seen at UNAIDS, one of the complainants against Louis Luer has been suspended from heading the Ethiopia office of UNAIDS and told not to go back into the office. Many people see it as exactly the retaliation that was promised in Mr. Sidibe's speech to staff, saying that he will investigate all accusers. What does Antonio Guterres think of this suspension?
We're aware of the issue. Our understanding is that this is completely unrelated. But questions should be directed at UNAIDS.
And also, just I guess in terms of the extent of this problem within the UN system, over the weekend it emerged, and I'm wondering if you will confirm and if he has anything to say on it, that there are sexual harassment complaints in Fiji at the UN World Food Program. And have the staff been suspended? And does the Secretary General believe that in such cases staff should be suspended? And what's the timeline for an investigation?
My understanding is that WFP is fully aware and is starting the procedures. I think WFP, under the leadership of the new executive director, has been extremely forward-leaning on these issues. They will handle them according to procedures. I'm not going to get into detailed because I'm not aware of the details in the investigation.
But is there a UN-wide policy under Antonio Guterres of suspending
I think each
pending
case.
investigation?
I think cases vary. One of the things that we're looking at the CB is obviously some sort of harmonization and understanding across the system. But obviously each, especially when it comes to specialized agencies, have their own governing body and their own rules and regulations. Ms. Lederer.
Also on the same issue, the UN is reopening its investigation into the sexual assault and harassment investigation into Luis Lures, the Deputy Executive Director of UNAIDS, who apparently his last day is today. Does the Secretary General have any comment on?
Sure, we welcome the decision by UNAIDS to reopen the investigation into these allegations and to suspend the decisions to close the case until the outcome of the broader investigation. The UNAIDS executive director remains recused from this case, and no UNAIDS officials will be involved in the case going forward. The World Health Organization Director General has agreed to serve as the decision maker in this case. I think the Secretary General is very appreciative of the head of the decision by the World Health Organization Director General to serve in that capacity. The complainant has called for an investigation to be conducted by an external independent investigation entity outside of the UN. The General Assembly has mandated OIOS to have operational independence to conduct the investigation. The UN office, OIOS, has been requested by the World Health Organization to conduct the reopened investigation, and they've agreed to do so. And obviously, as the process is ongoing, we won't have any further comment. Masood.
Thank you, Stéphane. Stéphane, on this meeting between Aung San Suu Kyi and the United Nations team, besides, did she give any assurances of repatriation? And also, the number one thing is, were there any discussions taking place at all about nationalities of these Muslims who have not been...
The meeting took place, the meeting is between Aung San Suu Kyi and the members of the Security Council. So we're just providing you some updates on the logistics and who they're meeting. It's up to the Security Council to speak for itself as to the nature of those discussions.
But what you're saying, there was no discussion held at all about...
As I just said, it's up to members of the Security Council to provide you with the substance of those discussions.
On this killing of the 7 or 8 or 9 journalists, does the United Nations have any update on that as to what really happened and what it can do to rescue whatever
Sorry,
else is left over
which case are you speaking about? What case are you speaking about, Masood?
there? The one that happened today. The
Yes,
killing
okay. In
of
Afghanistan, I just need to be clear what you're referring to. Listen, this attack happened today. It's obviously the local authorities will need to investigate. I think what it does show, it highlights yet again the dangers facing journalists who are trying to cover stories like Afghanistan. It highlights the danger of the essential work that media professionals are doing every day in the front lines in some of the worst and most dangerous places on earth.
And has United Nations being able to verify that in fact it was ISIL which attacked?
Masood, I just said it is up to the national authorities to investigate. These are.
Yeah, I asked last week about this national registration in Libya and the effect or the potential effect on that regarding the validity of the elections, the forthcoming elections.
No, I don't have anything for you on that. I should have, but I don't. Matthew.
Just one more on UNAIDS, then I have some other stuff. But I'm sure you've seen that Ms. Brostrom, the alleged victim in the Louis Ruiz case, has written and to say that she entirely rejects the reopening and has no confidence in it. I'm just wondering, if there a UN response? She's also said...
I think yes, go ahead.
No, she said that a toothless UN investigation could impact her ability to pursue the case outside of the system. So she is actively requesting that this not take place and views it as a cover-up. What's your response?
Well, I think my response is what I just read, which is, and I'll read it again, that the complainant called for an investigation to be conducted by an external independent investigation entity outside of the UN. The General Assembly, as you know, has mandated OIOS to have operational independence to conduct investigations. OIOS has been requested to conduct it and reopen the investigation by WHO. They've agreed to do so. I think we are all hoping that we all want to see what comes out of this reopened investigation.
I wanted to ask you about a video emerged over the weekend from Cameroon showing or depicting soldiers burning people's homes in the Anglophone areas. And what a lot of people focused on is that one of them, at least, is wearing a blue helmet. And I don't think it means the UN is doing it, but I do wonder, what are the rules? I wanted to ask you, what are the rules if people have served in UN peacekeeping missions? Have you seen the video?
I haven't seen that particular video, so I can't comment on the helmet, whether it was just blue or a UN helmet. We have seen in different parts of the world various security forces and army. We've seen reports of them using equipment that they own, which had been painted white or blue and reused domestically. It is a responsibility to ensure that no equipment that has UN markings is ever used in any domestic operation. But again, that's an issue of principle. I can't comment on that specific report.
Have you seen the UNDOF video from 2012 where the Austrian UN peacekeepers appear to be laughing as Syria?
Yeah, no, we've very much seen this video, which is rather disturbing. At that time, on the 29th September 2012, UNDOF reported that it saw 9 Syrian security personnel killed by 13 armed elements during an ambush inside the area of separation in the vicinity of a UN position on Herman South, on the Mount Herman area. The Security Council was duly informed of the incident. It was also publicly reported in the Secretary General's report of November 2012 on UNDOF's activity. I understand an investigation is being carried out by the Austrian authorities. We're looking forward to the results of that investigation. We will fully cooperate and are actively following up on this issue with the Austrian authorities. Nizar and then Masood.
On Yemen, after the assassination of Saleh Samad, has Mr. Griffith made any contacts with the Sana'a authorities there?
He's in touch with all the parties. I'll try to get you an update on his contacts. Masood.
Yes, thank you. Stéphane, 2 questions. Number one, that on this attacks by the American-supported guerrillas against the Bashar al-Assad's troop and killing, do you have any idea how many people they killed in Syria today that was reported?
I've seen press reports. I have no operational knowledge, or I've just seen press reports, so I have no particular comment, except to say that we obviously, as always, we would like to see an end to the violence.
Also, on the Iran's nuclear program, which is so far going according to what the agreement, but it is being said by Iran that if it is forced, it will abandon the agreement and then do what it wants. What does the UN watchdog
I'm not
agency...
going to get into hypothetical. I think the Secretary General has said directly and through what we've said here last week and stressed the importance of the JCPOA as a major diplomatic achievement. But I'm not going to comment nor predict on what may happen. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you on cholera in Haiti. I've been asking for some time for Josette Shirin to come and answer questions, but I see that she has answered some, but not all. What I wanted to know is, do you have the number of what percentage has been raised of what was at least sought or promised, and also whether any of that at all has been or will be devoted to individual...
I hope to have an update for you tomorrow on that.
And one other question. In Sudan, apparently just before she left to become the resident coordinator in Iraq, Marta Ruedas accepted from Omar al-Bashir something called the Order of the Two Niles. And she's quoted saying this is quite an honor. And so given that he's indicted by the ICC and given that the UN is supposed to minimize all contacts...
I'm not aware of any of that from
There's a photograph, there's quotes.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I'm not aware.
Would that violate the no contacts policy? If it did,
I'm not aware. I'm not.
Can you tomorrow, once you've seen it?
There's always hope tomorrow.
Okay.